Good evening and welcome to The Breakdown with me, Toni Waterman. Here are the big topics we'll explore tonight. Sustainable investing. More and more investors putting their money behind companies doing social good, but how profitable is it? We'll find out. The Bermuda Business Development Agency is out with its first economic impact report. I have an interview with interim CEO Sean Moran. Plus, what's all the buzz about? It sounds like a computer. The tourism app unlocking some of the most bespoke experiences on island. A sit down with Winnow co-founder Alison Swan. You're definitely going to want to stick around for that interview. But first, let's talk about sustainable investing. The name there kind of gives away what it is. But this is about investors putting their money behind companies that care about sustainability, both internally and externally. But the degree to which investors are willing to give up some of their returns, some of their profits for that sustainability varies. So this is what is known as the sustainability smile. You can see that right here. And it's basically the broad spectrum of investing. So at this corner of the smile, you have traditional finance. This is that pure profit motive. There's not really a social dynamic to this type of investing. Next up, we have ESG. That stands for environmental, social, and governance investors. So looking at how a company responds to climate change or making sure that they don't have child labor in their supply chain. Those are some of the things that ESG investors are going to be thinking about. They're concerned about making money as well, but they want to optimize their profits by looking at other things other than just the traditional financial element. The next on the list we have is SRI. So that stands for socially responsible investing. These type of investors, they also want to make money, but they want to invest in companies where they can align their belief systems. So they don't often invest in what are known as those sin stocks: tobacco, alcohol, firearms, and increasingly fossil fuels. They still want to make a profit, but they're going to be a little bit more forgiving as long as the company is adhering to that belief system. Then we get into impact investing. So this is the first time that we get into the place where performance is kind of secondary to what the social good is. These people are really concerned about that social impact and less about the amount of money that they're going to get back. And then we're just down here at philanthropy, where there's zero expectation of a financial return. It's all about doing good. So these, let's be honest, aren't traditionally things that you think about when you're looking at where you're going to invest your money, but they are becoming increasingly important, increasingly mainstream. So this is some fresh data out from the US SIF, and you can see that sustainable investing has really grown exponentially in the last 5 years. So in 2012, assets under management for that ESG in the United States sitting at $1.4 trillion. In 2018, we're up to $11.6 trillion. And this is what people are putting their money behind. Taking the top spot here is going to be climate change with about $3 trillion. Then you get into conflict risk, human rights, transparency, anti-corruption, not that far behind. All right, so we have broken down what sustainable investing is, but what does it mean for Bermuda? Is it actually a profitable investment to be making? And to help us talk about these things, we have two great guests on set with us tonight. We have Patrice Horner, who's the director at Senior Solutions and also a certified financial planner, and also Brian Dooley, general manager and portfolio manager at LOM Asset Management. Thank you both for joining us tonight. Patrice, I want to start off with you because you are just back from the World Investment Forum in Geneva. The theme this year was about sustainable development. So we were just talking about the equity side. This is about the development side. What were the major trends that came out of that forum, and what's most applicable for Bermuda?
Well, there were 5,000 people at this forum from around the world representing both the grassroots charitable entities that you had on your very far right part of the scale, as well as the full-on investment managers, sovereign wealth funds, family offices, BlackRock, PIMCO. And what they're all saying at the forum is that we need to bring up both the capacity for investing and the investment products and matching them. There are really particularly great opportunities for Bermuda. There are 17 sustainable development goals that came out of a 2015 agreement by the UN. So we're partially there. I think everybody is seeing that, they're hearing more about it. After this conference, I think you're going to see a very big increase in the awareness, primarily in climate control, because a September IPCC report on greenhouse gases shows that if we don't get this under control before 2030, the climate will be totally uncontrollable.
And
by
we've
that
seen
point.
in the investment, even on the green bond side, that there's a huge push towards climate-related type investments. It's so funny, Brian, that Patrice brings up BlackRock, because it was just, I think it was just last week that Larry Fink, who's the CEO at BlackRock, which is the largest asset manager in the world, he said that sustainable investing is at a tipping point, and I'm quoting here, sustainable investing will be a core component for how everyone invests in the future. How are Bermudians responding to this trend?
Well, we do see that among our clients, and I would say it almost goes by age. The younger, the millennial set, who may not have the most amount of funds to invest presently, seem to be the most interested in it. In fact, I attended a seminar, an ETF ESG seminar in New York also last summer, and the conclusion was that 90% of millennials were interested in socially responsible investing. Baby boomers, people like me, it was a little bit over 50%. So it's still there, but I would say about the same ratio would apply in Bermuda.
So popular amongst millennials on the equity side, but when it comes to the actual development that you were just talking about, I mean, who has to take the lead on this? Is it the investors? Is it the private sector? Is it the government?
The national entities really have to take a lead in some parts because it's affecting their community. But what we're seeing is that we have to somehow in the markets match up the need with the capital. There's a tremendous amount of capital sloshing around, and it's not making its way to the projects, in part because the projects may not be presented in a fashion that's acceptable to the large investment companies or may not be fully developed. I had a conversation with someone who is with Africa Bank, and they're looking for $10 million to help with their agriculture and their farming. That's a modest amount of capital, but it is difficult for them to find it. So really the United Nations has come to the investment community to say jumpstart it, because without the investment community and without the advisors, the people individually will not invest and the capital will not flow.
So there is a lot of capital that's sloshing around, especially right now, but a lot of capital in Bermuda actually goes overseas. So the pension funds, there's no real investment locally on the pension fund side. A lot of the companies that make money here send it back overseas. I mean, did we have to change the mandate that X percentage of the pension funds should be invested locally the way that we've seen other countries do this?
We've had this conversation for quite some time. I remember when I was with BF&M, we had an arm in Barbados and an arm in the Bahamas, and they both had a social element or a local investment element. And I think that would be a good idea. You have to have a robust stock market to do so. It is partially there, it just needs more volume, but you can also do it in government bonds.
I want to talk to you, Brian, about how profitable this type of investing is. And I'm just going to have a chart being brought up here. I know that you've taken a look at it. The MSCI All World Country Index for ESG-focused companies, and then just sort of the overall bunch. And they seem to be outperforming. When you look at that 5-year, 10-year plan, they're outperforming, and especially so when you look at the emerging markets.
Yes, especially emerging markets. I guess the one we haven't spoken about in the ESG is the G, which is the governance. That to us is one of the most important, if not the most important, of the 3 letters of the alphabet. If any company doesn't get its governance right, then the rest of it doesn't make sense. And I think it starts from the top down. We look at boards of directors, how the company is owned. And in the case of emerging markets, that's very significant because in many cases, the largest companies in EMs are owned by the government. So the government may have a different set of objectives than the minority shareholder. If you take Petrobras, for example, the government of Brazil may be interested in lowering gas prices so they can help the general economy, which might be okay from one standpoint, but from a shareholder standpoint, that could actually hurt the shareholders. So we try to avoid what we call state-owned enterprises in emerging markets.
I want to talk to you about this a little bit because there was an FT article late last month that came out with this big group of investors who have claimed that you have some of these very large companies that publicly align themselves with the Paris Climate Accord. They say they're for climate change and taking measures, and then behind the scenes they're aligning themselves through these trade unions for doing the exact opposite. I mean, is there any policing for the investor to know that these companies are actually doing what they say they're doing? And big companies, I'm talking BMW, BP, and steelmaker ArcelorMittal.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned BP. You may be aware in 2000 they merged with an American company, Amoco, and they rebranded themselves from BP Amoco to BP. If you look at all the logos for corporate oil companies, they're the one with the green symbol. But of course, we found out in 2010 they had a horrendous oil spill, which cost the company a lot of money. So that's an example of the tail risk that you incur just from a profitability standpoint.
And Patrice, you want to jump in this?
Yeah, S&P has come out with a division called True Cost, which is actually going in and measuring the actual impact and the adherence to those principles. And you know, there are 17 goals, and the ones again that we are very important for Bermuda is the climate action. And I just want to say before we leave that Bermuda is in a unique position with their insurance-linked securities and their stock market to match the projects that can deal with climate change with the capital. And Bermuda has a vested interest to do so because we reinsure that capital, we reinsure climate. So I would like to have a conversation with some of the reinsurance companies about how to do that.
So would I.
Yeah.
We'll do that soon. And of course, we saw just from the insurance side, Brian Duperreault sort of leading the charge in this $100 million infrastructure investment fund for here as well. All right, well, thank you both very much for joining us tonight, Patrice Horner and Brian Dooley. Thank you very much. All right, time now to head off for a quick break. But when we get back, $26 million, that's the impact the Bermuda Business Development Agency says it had on the economy last year, but with business confidence at a record low. What's going to come in the year ahead? Find out next.
New Toyota Rush, Bermuda's biggest SUV with 7 seats. There's always plenty of room. Available at Bermuda Motors.
From happy beginnings and life choices that we make along the way,
Colonial protects your lifestyle with the best insurance cover at the best possible price.
health insurance with far-reaching benefits,
Family protection and long-term financial plans.
business insurance and generous employee benefits.
For happy beginnings to happy ever after, visit CGIGroup.com.
Colonial, where people come first.
Welcome back to The Breakdown. Tonight, we are looking at sustainable investing. Investors putting their money behind companies doing good. Good for society, good for the environment, good for their employees. But a new model for sustainable investing has emerged, especially for bankers, and it has its roots in Bermuda. Adara Group founder and CEO Odette Excel gives us her take.
So Adara was born in Bermuda 20 years ago, and at the time it was considered to be a completely crazy model, but it's actually nothing more complicated than the idea that you can build a business, in this case in the corporate advice space, and use that business, embed it into a not-for-profit and use it as a funding engine, if you like, to support the most vulnerable people in the world. So the banking team, the corporate advice team, we are giving advice in the Australian markets, pro bono. All the fees that we're charging for giving that advice are going to our work on the ground with people in poverty. We now touch about 50,000 people a year living in extreme poverty. And in Uganda, the hospital that we've been working with for 20 years is now a centre of excellence, not just for Uganda and East Africa, but really for the whole developing world. We take 1,200 mums a year through NICU, 7,000 mums through maternity, and a much, much deeper set of service into a very large community. So maternal newborn child health is one big stream. And the other stream for us is really remote community development works. When I say remote, I mean 25 days walk from a road remote. Our most remote project is up on the border of Nepal and Tibet. And in that work is a whole suite of service delivery, all delivered by amazing locals who are part of the Adara family. But there's a really strong line in the centre of that around child protection. I think actually it's even bigger than that. This model will work in Wall Street. You know, I profoundly believe actually that people, no matter where they're working, they want to do good with their mastery. They want to do great things for the world as well as being great businesses. It doesn't matter if you're an actuary, you know, if you're a secretary, you know, if you're a receptionist, if you're an accountant, a lawyer, a reinsurer, a banker. You can do anything, but you can use your skills to help others. So the fact that nobody's making money, the only people that are being served out of this model, first are our clients, corporate Australia, who are getting advice at the highest levels from amazing leaders. But secondly, it's mums and kids in the world's remotest places in poverty. So there's an integrity that comes through, and I think that that has given us a kind of halo, if you like, around the brand. So we compete head to head with the biggest investment banks, but I think our clients are really pretty happy when they get to hire us because they know not only they're going to get the best, but they're going to get the best advice, and all the fees that we generate are going to go to do great work.
Well, every business wants to know that it is getting a return on its investment. That goal takes on new meaning when the bulk of an organization's funding comes from the government, and it's tasked with a critical job, attracting new business. I'm talking about the Bermuda Business Development Agency. It just released its first economic impact study. PwC crunched the numbers, which showed that the agency's work added over $26 million to the GDP last year. The bulk of that money came from 65 new companies, which have set up on islands since 2014, creating 165 jobs. These are companies which the BDA has had a direct hand in attracting from that first contact to setting up an office. I caught up with interim CEO Sean Moran at the BDA headquarters and asked him what types of companies the agency has been attracting.
So we're talking about companies that really go across all of our main industry pillars, from insurance and reinsurance companies to asset management companies, hedge funds, fund administrators, other fund service providers, law firms. There were some new international law firms that came to the island in 2017, as well as shipping companies, biomed, life science companies, and more recently, technology companies, fintech companies.
Okay, so 65 companies, 165 employees. When you average that out, that's 2.5 employees per company. Is that the type of business that Bermuda wants to be attracting, or do you want a business that comes with a bigger presence, with 10 employees, 20 employees?
Obviously, we'd love to see more in terms of the number of employees, but the companies have to start somewhere. I would also just clarify that these are companies that have incorporated their businesses in Bermuda and are in various stages now of licensing and continuing that process to set up a physical presence. So typically what we've seen is that these companies do set up with a senior level person, an executive, or somebody that may come in on a work permit for a specialized type of service, and then they will look to hire Bermudian people to work in that office as well. So that's the bare minimum that we would say.
Do you know from the 165 employees how many of them are expats and how many of them are Bermudian?
We do not. Okay. We do not. We don't have those metrics. We were specifically just checking the number of people that pay payroll tax for those companies, and anecdotally from calling the companies directly. Okay.
When you look at the landscape right now, the economy in Bermuda, you have rising healthcare costs, you have rising taxes, you have the government sitting on piles of debt, and you have not only an aging but also a shrinking population, which as a company looking to set up shop, those are a lot of negatives. Is this going to hinder businesses coming to the island going forward?
I don't think so. I think what we're really doing though is narrowing down the the number of and the types of companies that are going to find Bermuda attractive. I think that the government's push to really create Bermuda, raise Bermuda's profile as a center of excellence for fintech is going to be a good move in terms of attracting a new demographic, a new type of company and new types of employees to the island. Yes, we do have some challenges. Other jurisdictions also have many of the same challenges. And we're at an inflection point where I think we have to do something aggressive. And I think that the government-led push for the fintech business has certainly been aggressive, but also well thought out, well executed so far. The other thing I would say is that on the more established insurance and reinsurance side, we continue to see a lot of new companies setting up here.
Those fintech companies that the government's trying to attract, those tend to be more nimble companies. They can kind of work from anywhere in the world. Do you think that they would bring less people to the island than, say, the traditional insurance, reinsurance companies?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that is going to be the case. These are global companies, but I think we're seeing that across industries as well. The companies now all companies are tech companies to some extent. They're all globally mobile. I think if we get the right companies in here, and the legislation, of course, for the digital asset businesses does have a physical presence requirement, there will be the opportunities for these new companies to have people here. And they might not be in large numbers. You might not have 200 people employed here in Bermuda. But if you have a number of good quality companies, each employing 10 to 15 people on the island, that does move the needle in a place like Bermuda.
Business confidence in Bermuda right now is at an all-time low. Granted, it's only been tracked since 2014, but it's at an all-time low, and not by a small margin either. There was a big drop-off in this last survey. Does that not send out a very powerful message to the international business community who may be contemplating coming to Bermuda, that the businesses here are thinking that in the next 12 months, for them, things aren't looking so great?
Right. And that's a very tough one. The Business Confidence Index results were what they were. That is how companies on the ground here were feeling earlier this year. I think there's a delay, there's a time lapse that happened since then, but there's also been a lot of exciting developments since then. GDP, the national GDP number, for the first time has turned positive with 2.5% GDP growth for 2017. And with that announcement coming, quite late not too far after the Business Confidence Index survey results, I think that's something that should also be measured against those results, and the fact that international business was a significant contributor to that GDP increase.
Can I just challenge that just a little bit? Because 2017 was America's Cup. We also got first quarter GDP, which is now contracting again.
Right. I guess I want to focus on the international business contribution to that GDP because, again, I think America's Cup was a huge boon for the tourism, retail, and hospitality sector. But on the international business side of things, it really wasn't that huge a factor. It did bring people to Bermuda that have businesses, and we were able to sort of connect with some of them, and those connections have continued to develop relationships. But I think generally we had a very good year in 2017 here at the BDA in terms of our international activities, the number of companies that were set up. It was a marked increase from 2016.
Time now for a quick break, but when we get back, a homegrown travel app that's causing quite the buzz. Stay with us.
Win a trip or two to the 2019 Trinidad Carnival. When you purchase a car from Bermuda Motors, your name will be entered into a draw for a chance to win an all-expenses-paid trip for two, including flights, accommodation, and tickets to the Trinidad Carnival. Visit Bermuda Motors on Church Street or bermudamotors.bm.
Oh dear. If you're unsure where the trail leads, you're on the right path. Go to Bermuda.com.
Ever wondered what smart health insurance feels like?
Colonial's 24/7 worldwide health insurance does most of the thinking for you.
1,500 CGI health claims are settled daily.
60% of claims settled automatically.
You can access your health plan almost anywhere, anytime,
And have smart wellness with online data tracking.
and more provider choices for you and the people who matter most.
Premier Health is smart health insurance, and it feels good.
Colonial, where people come first.
Welcome back to the program. Well, in recent years, unique travel experiences have become the holy grail of the tourism industry. Tourists increasingly want singular experiences, authentic experiences. They want to feel like a local when abroad. In tonight's Bright Ideas segment, we take a look at a local app trying to do just that.
This property is beautiful.
It doesn't get more off the beaten path than a garden within a garden on private property.
This is like a straitjacket.
But to fully immerse yourself in this experience, you're going to need protection. A lot of it.
You have a Russian honeybee. They're quite aggressive. You have a European. You have a German.
No, we're not headed to the International Space Station, despite the resemblance in attire. We're about to go knocking on the door of 100,000 bees.
Oh my goodness.
Spencer Field is resident beekeeper on this property and dozens more throughout the island.
What makes queen bees different, they actually hatch out vertically. So right here, this is a queen cell. We can see a bit of royal jelly.
His beekeeping and honey-themed picnic is one of about 90 unique and private experiences on offer on the Winnow app, a travel platform connecting hand-picked insiders with adventure seekers.
It sounds like a computer.
It's been just over a year since the app launched. Alison Swan, who co-founded the venture with William West, says uptake has been strong, with about 100 downloads a day.
Our audience tends to be female and skew a little older. It's great news for us because also if they're on a family vacation, they're usually the decision makers about where people are going and how resources are allocated for the holiday.
Swimming with turtles and the Crystal Cave massage have been top picks. As winter approaches, Alison expects experiences to skew towards land. Bike tours in St. George's, and curated art tours in the city.
It's not really about high end, it's about it being an experience. I think that there are a growing number of people that want to have singular experiences, that want to have private tours, that want to have something that's a little bit more unique, exclusive, especially millennials. You know, they're really like, we're willing to stay in an Airbnb and spend a little bit more on the experience.
Alison is hoping to take that experience global. Besides Bermuda, the app has offerings in Aspen, Colorado, and is looking to add Tuscany, Italy, and Cape Town, South Africa soon.
It's all storytelling at the end of the day. What is going to be the story, the journey of this guest as they move through this experience? And how are they going to look back at it afterwards? And how are they going to explain this to their friends when they go home? So what we look for is passion. People who are passionate about what they do.
So this is a virgin cone, which means the bees built this within a month ago.
There are few more passionate about bees than Spencer Field. His company name will attest to that, as will anyone who braves the bees for the sweet taste of fresh honey.
Honey is the naturally sweetest thing
sweet.
occurring in nature.
All right, well, my mouth is just watering thinking about that honey. It was excellent. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of The Breakdown. Thank you very much for joining me. If you missed part of the show or you just want to tell your friends to watch, The Breakdown rebroadcasts on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and you can also catch it on the Bermuda Broadcasting YouTube page. Feedback can be sent to the email right here. And as always, you can follow me on Twitter for your latest business news. Coming up on next week's show, an inside look at Bermuda's hospitality industry. Tourism is on the rise. New hotels are on the horizon. But where are the workers going to come from? I hope you'll join me for that show. Until then, take care.